I'd like to call this workshop to order. The time is 12 noon. I wish to welcome everyone to the Superintendent's Workshop being held at the Joe N. Idlet Jr. Teacher Education Center. I ask that out of respect for everyone, please silence all electronic devices. Also, if you have any material you wish to share with any board member, please give that to our executive assistant, Mrs. Morey. We'll take a break every 2 hours if needed. Before that, we'll take one. Board members, reminder, refrain from speaking until recognized. Dr. Moore, the floor is yours for the purpose of the agenda. Much information to share as we prepare for the 23-24 school year. Thank you.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, and we will dig right into it. Our first two items will be presented. First item will be Dr. Jacobs, who will do the annual board member travel, and B will be Ms. Shields, reviewing Treasure Coast Technical College items.
Thank you.
Dr. Jacobs.
Good afternoon. Through the chair. It's on. This is a request for prior approval for board travel for the upcoming year. Any travel that exceeds $500 and is outside of the county requires the prior approval. You will see this item on the business meeting agenda tonight.
Board members, any questions? Hi, Mr. Barefoot, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Thank you. Board members, any questions?
I have a question.
Sure, Ms. Berenborg.
CBM, policy governance. What exactly is that?
So that is a very good question. I looked it up myself to find out. So policy governance assists individual board members in understanding the full role of policy development and oversight in their capacity as a board member. So if my understanding is it's a 7-hour workshop and it provides insight on those particular topics.
Because I've never seen that before on theirs. This must be new.
I am not
Okay.
aware of whether it is new or not, but I could find out for you.
Okay, and I know that we looked at addressing a policy change for online for board members, so none of this is being offered online then?
I would have to look at each of the specific conferences and see which ones were offered online and which ones were only in person.
And have we budgeted for all these things?
Yes, we have
Okay.
budgeted.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barefoot, any questions?
None, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Jacobs.
Good afternoon. The 4 items that I will be presenting today are all recurring items for Treasure Coast Technical College. The first item is the dual enrollment articulation agreement with TCTC. I'll begin again. The items that I will be presenting today are all reoccurring standard items for Treasure Coast Technical College. The first one is the dual enrollment articulation agreements with TCTC. Per statute, career dual enrollment shall be provided as an option for secondary students to pursue industry certifications and credits towards a high school diploma. You will see that there is one for public high school students as well as homeschool students. The next item is the Treasure Coast Technical College calendar for 23-24. Per school board policy, it states that TCTC shall submit a calendar each year for approval by the school board. The next item is the Treasure Coast Technical College tuition and fees for 23-24. Per statute, each district must establish a fee schedule for students pursuing post-secondary career certificates and adult general education. The tuition and fee schedule is unchanged from last year.
Thank you, Ms. Shields. Board members, any questions? I just have one. Ms. Shields, how's it going with the culinary, and where were we as far as startup for that?
Well, it is under construction. Construction is going well. We are looking at a start date of January 2024.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Any other questions, board members?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Rosario, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I brought up a concern around the homeschool agreement because if you look at the language in the agreement regarding homeschoolers and the comparison with what's on the state, when homeschoolers register for dual enrollment, there are no ties to the district at all. And the statute actually indicates that anyone from grades 6 through 12 can apply as a homeschooler independent of the district with IRSC. So that homeschool agreement, there are some things that are written in there that really need to be looked at and changed accordingly. I know there were some changes that were made, and I'm thankful for Ms. Besura, who made those changes regarding other students in the district who are not homeschool bound, but those who are homeschoolers, let me see, let me pull that up. We don't follow the same regulations.
Ms. Shields?
Are you referring to the Indian River State College articulation agreement or the one with Treasure Coast Technical College?
Even the Treasure Coast Technical College. It's dual enrollment in general.
I would have
Dual
to,
enrollment, yeah, dual enrollment in general. This says students must be in grades 11 through 12. And I understand, like in the nursing, program, like you have to have a certain, I think a certain age or certain
correct, there are certain industry.
qualifier. But in most of the other programs, you don't have that. And so I just think that this needs to be looked at again in comparison to what the statute states, just to make sure that we're in full compliance.
Okay.
There's also an indicator here. Let me see if I can find it now, of course. Where it says must present qualifying scores on CPT, Accuplacer, SAT, ACT, and the PERT test. And I know the PERT test is required for IRSC.
Right, so there is in statute a basic skills requirement for anyone who is enrolled in post-secondary career programs.
That would be an alternative. So the basic skills examination is an alternative if the student does not get the qualifying score on the SAT, ACT, or the PERT. So it's either or.
Okay, correct. So they have
So
to, right, so they have to show that they meet those basic skills requirements in order to be issued the career certificate.
So what happens to 9th and 10th graders? So can this actually say that a student must be, or qualifying must be a student in 11 through 12 for certain programs, and then 9th and 10th graders might be allowed to begin dual enrollment with TCTC under certain eligibility or something like that?
Yes, we can certainly review that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, board
So-
members? I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms.
Is
Rosario.
are you going to have enough time to do that before this evening?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Dr. Moore, our next agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just an update to the board. As you know, as we move through legislative session and July 1 has now hit us, there are a number of new laws that are in place. As a matter of fact, we have over 50 bills that impacted Florida school districts across our state. So our intent today is to quickly go through the process that our district is using in order to ensure that we are compliant with all of these different shifts in procedures based on law. And what you'll notice, just to set up this presentation, I won't go through all 50 because that would take all 4 hours, but I will highlight some of the big ones and the impacts that it would have or would have had if we did not act regarding our shifts in practice. And as you can see, what we've done for this presentation, we've grouped these 50 changes into student-centered laws, which would be required instruction, ESE, district operations, school safety, start times, things of that nature, and then ultimately budget, which we will continue to talk about through Mr. Fagan's presentation. So I'll just go through some and then wrap up my presentation with the process that we're using to ensure that we're in full compliance as we move forward. So House Bill 7039 is student outcomes, where we're looking at a shift in reading instruction, where we're using the science of reading. As you all know, our system has been deep into the science of reading, hence some of the results that we have experienced in our last assessment window. 3 cueing systems, visual memory, those kinds of things no longer will be allowed. Not an issue for us in our school system, as we are already deep into the science of reading. Same philosophy being applied to math now in terms of using early warning indicators as well as notice to parent in terms of participating in those interventions. They are expanding the New World Reading Initiative, which is free materials books to students going into pre-K now, and then incorporating language about dyslexia or the characteristics of dyslexia. Once again, because we've been so deep into the science of reading, we're in a good space there, but some additional work to move forward in that particular area. House Bill 19, IEPs, and Senate Bill 2090, Public School Progressions with Students with Disabilities. Some changes here as well. Conducting IEP team meetings to discuss the implications of students turning 18 1 year prior to them turning 18, not the year in which they turn 18. So that is the shift there. We will be in place for that when school starts. Requires information to include ways that students who are 18 years or older may be provided informed consent in terms of educational decision making. Once again, slight shift there, but we'll be prepared for that. Parents who may retain a 4-year-old pre-K student who's identified with disabilities in consultation with the IEP team, so you can withhold or retain your child in pre-K. And then demonstrating substantial deficiencies in early literacy skills must receive instruction with those students rather than just allowing them to move through the system. So we feel that we'll be just fine there. House Bill 379, technology in K-12 public space, required instruction in terms of social media, and yet another required instruction that we'll be covering. Prohibits the use of certain platforms. TikTok, we already have that in place, meaning our district devices won't allow access to those specific social media platforms. It authorizes instructional personnel to designate an area for wireless communication devices to be within a classroom. Our code of conduct requires those devices to be put away during instructional time, and as the next bullet reads, they can only come out in our schools when directed by the teacher. We were ahead of this in terms of what we approved under the leadership of this board with that specific policy there, so we are in a good space there. As you know, they just approved the required African American instruction, so once we have that in hand, we'll be reviewing that information and looking at the process that we already have to embed the two to ensure that we are in compliance with that. It requires a great deal of reporting in terms of action planning, pushing information back to the state. Senate Bill 240 and Senate Bill 196 also ensures each student in grades 9 through 12 have access to at least one work-based learning opportunity. Requires that high school students host an annual career fair and they have the opportunity with potential employers to interview, and that must be done during the school day. We did very similar events last year. We just need to expand upon those. We'll have that done. Controlled open enrollment regarding the continuation of career and technical education courses from middle school to high school. We have that addressed through our choice program. So if a student started a program in middle school and then articulates to a high school, that student will have the opportunity to articulate to that specific high school. And then high school, House Bill 265, high school equivalency diplomas. If a student takes the readiness exam and passes that, he will not or she will not be required to take additional coursework. They can move right from the practice test to the overall assessment for a GED. And then creating year-round pilots, which is House Bill 1537. The state will be identifying districts to work with in creating year-round schools So if we are selected, we'll be working with the state. September 11th will now be known as 9/11 Heroes Day with required instruction, once again, 45 minutes of instruction in middle school and high school. Allows possession of basically aspirin or things of that nature for headaches for students, and adds required instruction on on Asian American and Pacific Islanders. As you know, we've spent many times talking about House Bill 1, which is universal vouchers. It provides open enrollment, no cap in scholarships if a student is a resident of the state of Florida, is eligible to enroll in kindergarten through grade 12 with absolutely no caps, expands the authorization use of scholarships. So we've been looking at that. Right now we see very little impact in terms of our overall enrollment, but we continue to monitor it until we have a deeper understanding as to what the impacts would be. And then middle school and high school start times. We know that this is a start date of during the 25-26, must be in effect by July of 26. So over the next several years, we will begin doing this work. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to implement this. This is a major shift. It's just not changing start times. It's looking at routing for buses. We'll have to buy a new program to make sure we have the latest technology on how we're going to develop our routes to get everyone where they need to be. So this is a large lift that we'll be working on, but we will comply with it as it is written. And each of the new what we're doing now, each office under the cabinet members have been assigned one or more of each of these 50 different assigned changes in legislation. We have identified what effective dates for change are. So some of the ones that we went through now are immediate impacts that we will be changing. Others have year or 2 years depending on the implementation defined within the bill. And then we'll be identifying the changes or needed implementation change action steps to bring back to the board. And then we will hold an update for our board regarding where we are, and then ultimately aligning our policies for each of these changes. So a significant amount of work to do, but ultimately this cabinet has been well on top of it, and will make sure that we are in full compliance as we move forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Board members, Ms. Berenborg?
Sure.
I have,
Go ahead, Ms. Berenborg, thank you.
Okay, couple things. Slide 3, where it says the New World's Initiative. How will pre-K parents be notified?
It's all done through the outside source. They contract with companies who reach out to the students, so it's not necessarily anything that we need to do.
Okay, so a parent that they don't know they have a student yet because they haven't entered pre-K, so I guess I'm not sure how they're going to find them.
Well, it works. It's a program through the state, so they'll be able to identify the students based on the information that is available. They'll push them information through mailers, through advertisements. If they push us things, we'll push that out as well.
So we don't have to do anything?
We just have to inform and provide the information as it becomes available.
So would that be something that we'd want to put on our website?
Once that information is available
Okay.
to us, then we will definitely do that.
Thank you. Slide 6, the African American standards. I did watch that State Board of Education meeting. It was quite interesting. When do those have to go into effect?
They go into effect this school year. As you just referenced, they were just approved. Our district has superseded requirements in terms of African American history. We embed it throughout the school year and just don't teach it in isolation, but identify opportunities with our curriculum to support and enhance our traditional curriculum. Now that there are new standards, Ms. Basur and her team will go back and look to ensure that there's a level of overlap to ensure that we are covering those standards.
So I guess the question is, there's no book on which to use for a teacher, right? So we have to identify supplementary materials, which don't really go to the board before they use them to teach this with, correct?
We are currently, through the chair, we are also currently in a social studies adoption, so we are looking through, now that these standards have been approved, going back through the social studies curriculum to also see and identify opportunities for that. And what we will do then is analyze where the gaps are and seek out other curriculum that will support the standards, the new standards.
So how will we as a board ensure that the standards are being taught according to state statute?
Go ahead.
Go ahead, no.
We submit an implementation plan to the state for all required instruction. The implementation plan for African American history is going to, what we think we are hearing from the state is that it's going to be an additional layer of a plan. So we must submit that as a district to the state to show that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Okay, so you submit a plan saying this is how we're going to
Correct.
be teaching.
We don't have the
standards.
template of that plan yet. We have to
Right.
get that
I mean,
from the
since
state when it
just got
happens.
approved. Okay.
Correct. But every year, we submit to the state our required instruction.
Yeah, and the only
information.
reason why I ask that is because, after watching that meeting and all of the hullabaloo about a couple of the standards, I anticipate hopefully some will be tweaked, if not changed. And if so, how's that going to affect us with purchasing and things like that?
We are watching those meetings,
That's all we can
With,
say at this point. Okay.
as they're happening real time as well, so that we can be
Okay.
as in front of that as possible.
Okay. Slide 9.
Go ahead.
All right. Year-round school. So you say if we're selected, is there an application process for that?
Through the chair, we are not clear as to whether it will be an opportunity for districts to apply or the state reaching out to you, but there will be a small number. Is that- okay.
The initial information we have on the year-round school pilot project is that districts will have the opportunity to apply to the state for that project, and a small subset of districts will be selected to engage in that work.
So are we applying?
I do not have the answer to that.
Because I would assume if you do apply that you need to have a focus for that school.
Through the
I'm a
chair-
little aware of this before, because the school that I was principal at, we were looking at doing this and doing an application process. So I'm just curious, are we going to apply, and if so, what is the focus going to be for the school?
So we have not had those conversations internally regarding whether we would or would not apply. So these things are basically just approved. So that's something that we could look at and determine, A, is it feasible, and is it something that we would want to pursue?
Yeah, because having done the studies on that years ago, the benefits of it were really great for parents, if a parent chooses for that. When is the application deadline then?
Currently, we do not have any additional information on any specific application deadline, just that there will be an application process.
Okay, I'm just asking, consider it. Thank you.
Dr. Posca, any questions? Okay. Mr. Barefoot or Ms. Rosario?
None from me, thanks.
Yes, I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
With regard to the African American curriculum, the African American history curriculum, just some follow-up thoughts. If the curriculum that we are going to consider is tied to standards and the statute, then it wouldn't be considered supplemental. It would have to be adopted by the school board. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, you are correct in that. What we are also finding with many of these new requirements is that the state is doing a heavy lift to provide resources to us. So there may end up being state resources that we would, as a district, consider supplemental, but that would not need to necessarily go through a full adoption process.
Okay, so would that possibly be the case for this first year as a first year implementation, and then the following year as we are adopting our history curriculum, we would then look to incorporate some of those requirements within the new curriculum?
Yes, so we are currently in a social studies adoption. And so what we will do is go back now with the new standards and see if any of those new standards are already identified and taught through some of our current curriculum, like Amplify teaches a lot of science and social studies curriculum. So we will identify if we are currently teaching those standards anywhere else, and then identify the areas where there are gaps, and then lean on the state for the resources that they will be supplying to just jigsaw together the curriculum that will meet these standards. If there is no way of meeting these standards through all of those different avenues, we would then seek out to purchase an additional curriculum to meet those standards, and that would then go through a process and be brought to the board.
Okay, because it doesn't seem like any of that is going to happen within the next 2 weeks.
You're correct with that.
So we're considering then a full implementation for the upcoming school year, not this school year, correct?
Through the chair, there's the commissioner is hosting an African American History Task Force on August 7th. So we hope to listen carefully and hear some guidance, because all of the districts are in the same place, hearing the newly adopted standards. Then some of the comments from state board members were maybe they would release a curriculum like the resiliency toolkit or something through CPOMS. So there's a lot of waiting and seeing, but we will be proactively ready to move once we get that guidance.
All right, and then I did have some, I guess, additions to the presentation that the superintendent just provided. One of the bills, and I know that you said that you couldn't incorporate all of the bills and all of the changes in legislation, but there was one in particular that is an education bill, House Bill 1069. That does have immediate impact. Much of it has impact, maybe not directly in the classroom, but certainly in terms of some of the more controversial issues that we've been facing, and kind of gives definition to the term sex. It allows for an understanding of certain titles and pronouns. It prohibits classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity from occurring in pre-K through grade 8. And of course, there's so much more responsibility in terms of classroom materials, classroom libraries, and so on. So I suppose this question is for the superintendent. In reviewing House Bill 1069, what would you provide the board at this point in terms of some of those key items to be addressed moving forward for the new year?
Through the chair, I'll have Dr. Shafty respond, but we are aware of that. We've been meeting with our principals quite often over the last 3 days, and we'll continue to make sure they're well informed of these shifts and requirements. Dr. Shafty?
Through the chair, so we were responsive in this as well. We've updated the new parent acknowledgement form for library access. We had the selection where the parent could select that if the material was challenged, they would select to refrain the child from checking it out. Because 1069 requires the book to be removed from shelves within 5 days, we no longer need that selection for parents, so that form will be significantly streamlined this upcoming year. As well, we followed this bill through rulemaking and updated our social studies adoption committee of the new expectation to prohibit classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity. Pre-K through 8 for our social studies adoption committee, it's core K-12, so we updated all of our rubrics in response to this proactively, so the committee that's currently reviewing is reviewing against this new legislation.
Okay, thank you for that. The other thought I had with regard to the wraparound or the possibility of having a wraparound or applying to the state for that. Again, that would be something that I would imagine the board, and I don't have that information pulled up in front of me, so I apologize. but that would be something the board would have to approve as well. And someone, Dr. Moore, let me know, moving forward if I'm wrong. Because that has to deal with the management of schools, creating a school facility, obviously with start times and end times and curriculum and all that other kind of stuff, that would need to come to us for approval. Is that correct?
I'll let Ms. Shattuck answer that question, but.
Through the chair, so you're wondering, the question is, what exactly would need to be approved? Sorry.
If the district is considering, if Dr. Moore, under Dr. Moore's leadership, if the district is considering having one of our schools become or apply for wraparound services or being a wraparound school, that would have to come to the board for approval. Is that not correct? Is that correct?
When you say the wraparound school, you're talking about the full school year?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So I do not know that we have guidance, specific guidance on exactly how that process will go. So I think that may be subject to receiving further guidance on how that process is going to work. But my understanding would be that it would be something that would go to the board.
Okay, because if that's the case, I heard Dr. Moore say that you all haven't had that conversation yet, but that would be part of board responsibility that we could give you direction moving forward on whether to consider this or not. I think if there were a subsequent workshop, I suppose, with, you, Dr. Moore, providing for us all the pros and cons of what this looked like, as a board, we can kind of give you direction on that, whether we would be interested or not. And if we are, my next thought is, in the process of updating our strategic plan, it might be a consideration to add it somewhere that we would consider other options such as wraparound services or wraparound school or something to that effect moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few comments. I think the first thing you said, Dr. Moore, was science of reading. I think it's really paid off, as you can see by our scores, and the early warning indicators for math. I think we're doing very well again. You talk about IEPs and Mr. Seymour and ESC. Obviously, these are, IEPs are law, and making sure that our teachers have the support and that our parents know what's happening, I think, is very important, so bringing that up. We studied year-round schools here very carefully. I know I'm dating myself on that. And I too would be interested in a pilot. Now, Dr. Moore, correct me if I'm wrong, it's still the 180 days, but we just do the calendar differently. That's what it used to be. And when we looked at that very, very seriously, it was basically, you still had your Christmas, you still had your spring break, you went to school in July, but you had a fall, there's a whole bunch of things there. And many times when I look at how we're doing, especially since COVID, and obviously we did well, sometimes with that summer slide, maybe this pilot could be pretty interesting. And I think that we are a progressive school district, and maybe we could apply for that. But I would be very interested in looking at a little bit more of the parameters on that. I know we talked a little bit about vouchers and enrollment. We'll know more about that probably after day 10 or when they have the October FTE. As far as the African American studies, I did not listen to it. I will be listening very closely to the August 7th one, because I want to be very, very clear on what the expectations are. And then I will make more of a comment after that. There's one other thing. And as far as our checkout in libraries, and as Dr. Shafty just reviewed, I'm very, very excited to see with the renovation at Sebastian River High School, soon to be Vero Beach High School, what kind of, just students going to the library to check out a book, period, and because obviously we know with reading and so forth. And I know that students use a whole different system now with laptops, iPads, looks, whatever. But I just want that to be an atmosphere where students can go in and learn and discuss and have a good dialogue. All right, any other comments on that? Yes, Ms. Berenborg?
I have one more, and I think I'm going to bring it up now.
Okay.
Something I probably will bring up again tonight. I noticed we're going out, hopefully, or we're voting whether or not to go out for a tan again. And this is something, that really gets under my skin. Here it is, our taxpayers pay a lot of money for taxes. It goes to the state, it gets divided out, and some of it comes back to us. And people don't realize about required local effort that their tax money here that they pay for schools doesn't really go to all of our schools. It goes to other schools as well, which is fine. The problem is now we're kind of getting penalized because of that. And we do almost every year, except for if you can play the magic game of move the money around, which I appreciate you moving that money around last year. Otherwise, we have to go out for tan because we're short on money in September, October, November, until the tax rolls come back and we get the money back. And so we have to go and get, basically it's costing taxpayers more money to borrow money because it goes to the state and gets held up, which isn't really fair to school districts who have a good tax base that are being taxed and the money's going elsewhere to save. So it's costing us literally, how much is the money this year, Mr. Fagan?
To the chair, to the board, the cost of this tan is probably about $200,000.
$200,000. Think of what we could buy for $200,000. Again, every time I see this come up, I get so irritated because, it really isn't necessary for penalizing districts who have a good tax base. It's 14 districts that have this happen. However, only 7 districts are really in this pinch because of the size of the district and the fact that you can't just borrow from one bin to pay another bin. It has to pay for salaries because people need to get paid October and November. So what I'd like us to do possibly is vote to agree to kind of come up with some narrative of a letter that we could form to these 6 other different districts to say, would you like to get together as a consortium and develop really good a legislative platform for fixing this for those 7 districts that it affects. It wouldn't affect everybody, and I've heard from our legislators before when I bring this up that, oh, well, where's the money going to come from? I spoke to Mr. Fagan, he's kind of got an interesting plan. It's been done before. It was called advanced
Funding to the chair.
Advanced what?
Advanced funding.
Advanced funding. And possibly, I got to look up the statute. He's going to give me the statute to look up from before. This was put in place years ago, but then it was pulled back because they needed the funding at the state level. I don't know whether or not it was put in place for every district or just for the 7 that it affects. If it was put in place for every district, I can see where they would balk at that because it would be a huge chunk of money that the state doesn't have. But if it was put in place just for those 7 districts to be able to hold harmless for those 3 months to be able to pay bills and not cost us $200,000, that money's being made because we borrow the money. And so it's coming out of taxpayers' money. It's not benefiting kids. It's benefiting the organization that lends us the money. Which, we appreciate them lending us the money, and, they're in business to do that. But this could be fixed if we really went to our legislators and said, this is a serious problem for just 7 districts. Could you fix it? So I kind of want to bring that up tonight as something that if we all agree to move forward with designing some sort of statement to put out to those other 6 districts to say, would you like to get together to fix this problem? Okay?
Mr. Fagan?
To the chair, as an example for next year, 27% of our money will come from the state. That's approximately $42 million. They pay us equally over each month, so that's $3.5 million a month. I burn that up. Payroll for 1 month is more than that. So you get 113 million, or 73% is your local money. That doesn't hit until November. Number 2, we're not a net investor. We're a net borrower, so I got just enough cash to get me through the year. Other large counties, such as Palm Beach, they're kind of in the same boat. They're very, very property tax heavy, but they get $1 billion. They don't spend it all. They have a huge rollover, so they have that cash flow that allows them to roll over. So they're probably a net investor. We're not. We're just getting by paycheck to paycheck until you get that $113 million. So there's probably about 5 or 6 counties that are small like us that struggle a little bit. Your other ones, either one, are balanced out so they get equal, or two, they have enough rollover cash that they don't really have to issue a TAN.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg, very good idea. Mr. Barefoot, any comments?
No.
You good? Okay. Ms. Rosario?
You've already went through, buddy.
Dr. Pasca?
No, I mean, other than I would certainly support your movement to try to move on this legislatively. So I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, they've called us land rich, pupil poor. I mean, we've talked about this
Yep.
for years. For years. So, I'm sorry, Dr. Moore, were you going to say something?
No, I'm
Okay.
just,
All right, we will move on then to our next presentation.
all right, so items D, E, and F will be presented by Ms. Basura.
Thank you, Ms. Basura.
Through the chair, good afternoon, board members. As briefed during your individual board briefings, I have several contracts that are all renewals to share with you for your consideration. The first contract is the renewal via iReady. iReady is a computer adaptive blended learning program that serves our students in kindergarten through 8th grades in ELA and math. This includes 3 diagnostics per year. It identifies opportunities for growth and sets students on an individualized learning path. This program also helps our teachers be more prescriptive in identifying the learning gaps and providing specific resources that will help accelerate, remediate, or differentiate instruction. The second contract is a renewal for Imagine Learning credit recovery. We are required by Florida statute to offer credit recovery options to our students. Imagine Learning is fully aligned with Florida standards, currently serves our students and about 50 other districts in the state of Florida. And my last contract is a renewal of Lexia Core 5 and Power Up Literacy. This is an intervention program, and it serves our students kindergarten through 12th grade. It also provides blended learning opportunities for explicit, systematic, and personalized learning. It meets the state's requirement of an adopted intensive intervention curriculum. It was approved by the state, and that approval runs through March of 2026. And SDIRC board approved it in July of 2021. I'm just bringing it back as a renewal purchase. I'll pause there to give you a chance to ask any questions.
Okay. Ms. Berenborg.
Sure. iReady. Have we done an analysis of how well it's aligned to the new assessments?
So I don't know that we've done that, but what we do know is that we do know what a scale score in iReady means and how our students perform according to that scale score. What we are now doing is aligning that work to the PM1, PM2, PM3. So trying to find correlation between what they mean. It was really important for us to know where our students were, and that was difficult to do this past year because it was a new assessment. We didn't have an understanding of what a scale score on the new FAST test meant. We had ratings, we had numbers, but we didn't, what was a 435? We know what a 435 is in iReady. So I think that we're deep in conversation with iReady around correlating to the state standards and the new tests.
And has there been an analysis done by them or us about gaps?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm sure there is. I just don't have knowledge of that.
And there's no other competing curriculum online that you'd want to look at?
iReady is in, I think, 63 counties across the state of Florida because it is so prescriptive. I hesitate a little bit to start opening up and looking at new curriculum because we have a learning curve with teachers.
No, I understand that.
And so we have found some success with this in terms of we know what it means, we know what it provides, our students have familiarity with it, and it is that prescriptive and diagnostic curriculum that supports our students.
Yeah, I know we have to have something. I'm just curious if we're having the best. Obviously you've done really well, so I'm not complaining, but I'm also thinking, all right, now that we have the new assessment data back, where are the gaps? What is
Right.
it that iReady's not giving us information on that we can still improve, obviously, because even though we're celebrating, we still have kids that can't read. So where is it that we can improve?
Thank you.
Ms. Rosario? Mr. Barefoot, any comments? I'm sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
here.
Okay, go ahead.
No, thanks.
No, I just wanted to just throw out, it's not anything new. You all know how I feel about iReady not providing dual language services or fully dual language services for our ESOL population. That's a gap that certainly needs to be addressed. I know that, I think if I remember correctly, last year, what was provided as a follow-up was that they may provide glossaries in some areas, but it's not a full dual program. So I think that that is an area that definitely needs to be improved.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario. Ms. Becerra?
Thank you, Mrs. Rosario, for bringing that up. I actually did do some fact-finding with iReady and explored that a little further. And also even with our own schools, iReady has heard the concerns. That's one of the things that has been great with them, to partner with them in this work, is we present to them some things that concern us, and they go back to their drawing board and remedy those or add to those and enhance those if they are able. Spanish language is supported within iReady, the assessment, the instruction, and even all the way down to the games that students play. They can just click on if they are wanting to hear something in Spanish, they can. The list of iReady lessons is in Spanish as well. The parent reports are also able to be printed in English and in Spanish. The other thing that we did actually utilize this year too, to a great degree, was their diagnostic assessments in Spanish. And we did that at Fellsmere to begin to start to assess the quality of the dual language program at Fellsmere that I know, we're all big fans of. So we want to start to assess the quality of that program. So we did do iReady assessments in Spanish at Fellsmere this year. So thank you for bringing that up and reminding me.
Of course, absolutely. Thank you for that follow-up. And since we used it last year with Fellsmere, do we know what the success rate was?
We're still analyzing that data along the way. It's the first time that they've taken the test in Spanish, so everything is baseline in that first year.
Now, if they're a dual language school, wouldn't they take it in both Spanish and English?
Correct.
And then, so students took it in both languages?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. And so which one would the school retain or use for assessment purposes? Would it be the higher of the two?
So,
or is it just used for diagnostic purposes?
Thank you for that question. We don't use the iReady diagnostic for things like assessments to assign grades or things like that. We use it more as a diagnostic to help drive instruction where there are gaps or where maybe we think we've taught students something, but the assessment data doesn't show us that. So it's not used to assign an assessment grade. It's used to really drive the way we instruct. It's prescriptive.
Right.
So great questions. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. I have another one then for you. In the implementation last year being the first year, was it implemented in a particular grade like first grade and then next year will be first and second and so on? Or was it implemented across the board with all of their grades? Because I know they're in that phase in.
Correct.
Right? They're still in the middle of the phasing in.
Yes.
Do you know?
Yes, I do. We did not administer the Spanish diagnostic at the beginning of the year. We only administered it later in the year once we became familiar with it. And it was administered in kindergarten, first and second grade, which are the grades that are currently participating in the dual language program. Next year, we will add third grade.
That's wonderful. I'm very interested in hearing the follow-up and seeing how that goes. Because clearly, and Fellsmere is such a perfect opportunity to begin this. If a student is literate and fluent in their home language, then transferring those skills into a second language just gives them more opportunity for growth. Statistically, I mean, as you know already.
You are correct.
And if they are not literate in their first language, chances are they will struggle in learning their second language, which really has an impact on our overall iReady grades, scores, and obviously the FAST testing and so on and so forth. So moving forward, I'm super interested in hearing the follow-up for this. So thank you for that implementation, by the way.
You're welcome. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes. I'm very familiar with iReady, and one question on Imagine Learning with credit recovery. Do we know how many middle school and high school students achieved credit recovery this summer, or how many?
I do have the report on that, but it's by a course, so it's not necessarily by a student.
Okay. All right, I'll check with you on that one. I'm not as familiar with Lexia and the personal learning. So, Ms. Becerra, let's say at the elementary school, if they're having a problem with a certain standard in math, is that where they go in and take a look at that and it helps them, or how does that work?
So with Lexia, that is an English language arts curriculum.
Okay.
But yes, it does exactly what you just suggested, but for English language arts.
Do we have one for math?
We do.
Other
We use reflex math, but we, with the new legislation, we will be exploring some other options to add an intensive intervention program with math.
Thank you. Any other questions, board members, on that subject? Okay, Ms. Becerra.
So my next item is the annual update to the 23-24 student progression plan. The State Board of Education requires us to maintain a student progression plan that outlines policies and procedures relating to promotion and retention. Our district student progression plan helps to ensure that the required program of study, placement, promotion, reporting, retention, and assessment procedures are comprehensive and follow state statutes. Our district student progression plan has been revised to reflect any legislative changes and has been edited for clarification.
All right, board members, any questions on our student progression plan for 23-24? Good. All righty.
Okay, and my last item for today is the consideration of book orders for our school media centers for the school year of 2023-24. This item is not to be confused with the weeding process, which is something our schools recently completed, nor is this to be confused with the books that were discontinued and that information that was sent to the state as well as board members. This item is to purchase library media materials in accordance with Board Policy 2520 and House Bill 1467. It's a new process and requires all book purchases to be board approved. So at this time, I would like to invite Dr. Shafty to share some additional information, as she is the person who worked directly with our amazing media specialists and our principals navigating these new requirements. Dr. Shafty?
Thank you. Through the chair, thank you for considering this. Our media specialists are so excited to have this opportunity to purchase. I can assure you that on January 30th, all principals, APs, and media specialists completed the state's online training, so they are very well aware of not only the criteria for selection, but the implications if the selection isn't made with due diligence. Subsequently thereafter, our board approved our policy on February 27th, which set forth very clear procedures for the purchasing of these materials. And then just after that, we met with all principals and their media specialists at the same time to do a deep dive into that policy so that they can understand the procedures in place. The 4 schools after that have brought forth purchases will be Osceola Magnet, Oslo Middle, Rosewood Magnet, and Vero Beach Elementary. The criteria for selection was very much grounded in the state's online training. They were based on student interests. They were based on circulation or checkout information if they had books in a series and were missing a book or want to move forward with the books because the kids have been asking for it. Topics, library journals, connection to core knowledge curriculum, Amplify, the state standards, Sunshine State Young Readers Award nominated, as well as any student requests and student demographics. With the preliminary review, our media specialists conducted a search. They looked at peer reviews when available. What I've learned, not necessarily my area of expertise, but I've learned a lot, is some nonfiction texts will not have a peer review, or books that have multiple books in a series. Every book in the series may not necessarily be peer-reviewed. So through either the purchasing through their own personal dollars or the review online, conducted the peer review. 3 out of the 4 schools presented the peer reviews to their SAC committee, understanding that parents that have a vested interest may not be a part of the SAC committee. Schools ensured that communications were sent on social media, school messenger, or some other platform to all of their families who, if were invited to attend, if they wished to take part in it. The composition of every committee bringing forth that recommended these books were very parent-heavy. Osceola had 10 parents and 1 community member. Oslo had 5 parents, 3 community members. Rosewood had 7 parents and 2 business partners. And then Vero Beach Elementary also had 2 parent representatives, which by far, when you look at the stakeholder groups engaged, parents were the dominant stakeholder group. So we're very proud of our media specialists for not only engaging in a new process with new statutes and new board policy, but the SAC committees really invested the time to understand a brand new process. Many of the SAC committees, if not all, also had awareness of the state's training and had a final vote unanimously to approve the list before you. A challenge with the state statute is when a book is recommended, that we aren't able to go to the companies to retrieve an advanced copy of the book before purchasing it. So as a layer of safeguarding, if approved by the board, the media specialists have the understanding that all new materials will be read in their entirety before going on the shelves for student access. All of the vendors, whether they are Scholastic or whomever else, we just can't get advanced copies, and ideally we would say, please read the books in its entirety before going on the shelf. We're just not in a place with our vendors to do that, so we felt the most appropriate step would be before students have access to them, they would be represented to these SAC committees, and the media specialists absolutely understand that the implications to what can and cannot be on those shelves for student access. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions on their behalf.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, I have a
Oh,
question.
sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ms. Berenborg, then Ms. Rosario. Thank you.
couple things. Training for new staff. So I know we've had some new media specialists, so they are getting the training when they come on board?
All of our media specialists spend that district PD day, that August 4th at Vero Beach High School together. The content is very appropriate for them to learn together at the same time. So along with the state's training, they will also have a refresher on the library management platform, as well as ways of work and support for each other. So that day they will stay connected to one another, and we've already reviewed the content. It's going to be exactly what they need to be successful.
Okay, so I attended that one with the media specialists, and so is that the same exact training they're going to get again?
The state's training?
Yes.
No.
Okay, how about new people, though?
Our
Will they go
leads,
through that?
Yes, our new staff, they have to go through it every year anyway by state statute.
Okay.
The state informed us that they are updating that training, so as much as we would love all of our media specialists to go through the whatever version of the training is released, I'm not sure we'll have it in hand on August 4th.
Okay.
Once we do, we will make sure that they go through the training. We have to report it and certify it annually.
Gotcha. Just a kudos to all of the media specialists that were so patient, waiting so long to be able to do this. So we appreciate that, and going through all of the, processes that they had to go through in order to get the books to us. So with book series, though, it has been brought to my attention that there are some book series that we know and love for children that after a while they throw in some interesting things and characters. But you're saying that if it's a book series, they don't necessarily have to read the next book?
There's not necessarily a peer review, whether it's the American Library Association. They don't always review every book in a series, but the safeguard we put in place is if approved, the book has to be read or the material has to be read in its entirety before inventorying and cataloging for student access.
So let's say Babysitter's Club. They pick up a new book on the Babysitter's Club, and the media specialist reads it and then says it's her own opinion whether or not it's approved, or does it go to the SAC team again?
From my understanding, these 4 schools will take it back to SAC. The
Okay.
perspectives of the SAC committee or the committee that they used has the balanced perspective to represent the demographics that they serve, along with parents and community members. So my understanding is these schools would feel a level of comfort taking it back to a committee decision, understanding that the statute reads that the liability falls very heavily on the media specialist and the principal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Ms. Rosario?
Thank you so much. So with regard to the training, until an update is made by the Department of Education, the mandate still holds where teachers, new staff in particular, who have not received that media centers training, the current one, it's still a mandate. They still have to take it. It's not like we're putting everybody on hold until this update. So it's still a mandate as of now, until that moment where it is updated, and then the updated version will then be moving forward the new training for media center specialists. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, perfect. So going into this new school year, we will have staff who have not been trained in the current, with the current training, that current video PowerPoint thing, right?
We still have some vacancies in that position, so once we have an assessment of which schools have new staff, one of our vacancies, we are hoping the media assistant steps into that role with the right certification. So in that instance, the media assistant actually completed the training with the media specialist this school year, so we will have to take it on a case by case who the person is. But either way, everybody starting as a library media specialist this upcoming school year will or have already taken that training.
Okay. I also have a question about the forms that are online. So I've shared this before, that SAC committees were, I'm not saying that the schools aren't making an effort to reach out to parents who are not on the SAC committee, but there are concerns that some parents have not been invited to these workshops or these settings where they have been reviewing these books. Also, there's a concern that one particular school, for example, invited teachers to submit their requests for their classroom libraries, and some of these books here that are on our agenda would be classroom library books as well. However, not all teachers submitted their requests for these particular schools. So are these, I guess I'm leading into, what are the schools doing to ensure that all teachers are providing a list, including classroom libraries, number one, and number two, what is the process as an ongoing receipt of these books to be approved? What is that process going to look like moving forward?
Yes, so that is part of the August 4th date where the media specialists will come together to have that conversation. From the information we have from schools, that there was an outreach to all of their families through school messenger or social media, whatever platform the parents are most responsive for that particular location. There was outreach prior to the SAC meeting to ensure that invitees were welcome to come to it. And as far as the classroom libraries, I believe these purchase lists are squarely for the library media centers. Classroom libraries would be a strategy or a tool by the classroom teacher who would determine the best way to inventory that. And once they are inventoried, if the teacher chooses to maintain a classroom library, they will be searchable to their families on our new library management platform.
Okay, and then I saw one of these attachments is Follett, and we're not using Follett. So why would this request on here be a Follett invoice when we're not ordering from Follett at all?
Follett's parent company is Destiny or Tidal Wave, so we would still be able to use those as purchasing entities, but our library management system moving forward is not Follett, it is Insignia.
Yeah, I have a concern about this because this Follett, what looks like an invoice, would have been dated it's dated 5/10, May 10th, and it says prices are guaranteed through 6/27. And we're way past 6/27. So all of these books that were on Follett, those prices are not going to be accurate if we were to vote on this tonight. So that entire list really needs to be pulled from tonight's agenda.
And
that's coming from Osceola.
I will have to follow up on that. But we didn't have, in order to be prepared for this meeting, we had to upload and prepare the materials in advance. So that's why the dates are as they are. And our
I understand.
Our understanding.
I understand, but the school should have just updated it before submitting it to you, with the accurate number or amount, because that's not the accurate amount right now. So I'm just bringing it to your attention. It should be removed from tonight and then updated.
We can follow up. Usually once the quote is given, the company will honor that quote. So that's something we can follow up on.
Well, it doesn't say that here. It says prices are guaranteed through 6/27/2023. It doesn't say moving forward, we will honor that. So thank you for looking into it.
Yep.
The other thing is, I was looking at these lists, and what I would like to have received is this list. And I know that they did not just give you these lists last week. I know they gave these lists to you all long before the last 7 days. To submit them or turn them into board members so that we can look at them with the appropriate timing as well, because this is a lot. And I'm hearing that you're saying that the SAC committee would have reviewed every single one of these books in each one of these schools. But as far as voting on a book, it is a very big responsibility on my part, on this board member's part, to ensure that the books that I approve or give my approval would have been, I would have appreciated more time to look into it. The other thing is the formatting in which it was provided to us is very different from each school. So some schools, like I think it's VBE, their formatting here, when you pull up the attachment, it only has title. But you have to scroll all the way down before you can see on a separate form the author, the ISBN, and the price. So unless I print it and put them together, it's not easily viewable, right? It's not like on an Excel sheet and then I can just scroll the Excel sheet and see all of the information that way. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that makes sense. We can come up with a streamlined format for book purchases in the future to make sure that it's easier.
Yeah, I thought we were doing that. I thought that was the understanding, that everybody would have the same format because it would just make it that much easier for everyone, especially with the submitting. I don't even know if you'd have to submit these to the DOE, but who knows, that might change, right? I know you have to submit those books that were, that are requested to be removed, but do we now have to submit those that we are newly purchasing? And if we have an issue, right now the answer might be no, but if we have an issue, that might change in just a few months. And so having accurate records would just seem to make sense in terms of the formatting of how they're presented to us.
Sure, that makes complete sense, and we can streamline that expectation moving forward.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ms. Rosario. Dr. Posca, anything? Just one thing I think Ms. Berenborg wanted to follow up to. I did attend the state training with principals and APs for the media selection. This is a huge job. Thank you very much to all the media specialists and Dr. Shafty for making sure we're following our guidelines and state statutes. I appreciate that. Dr. Moore, we still have as a form, if a parent doesn't want a child reading books from the library, they can just check it. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. If I'm just trying to guess here, how long was it before, I mean, this is the first of some schools. Obviously, some other schools will be coming along, but how long was it that we didn't order books?
At least 2 academic years.
Okay. So do you have a timeline on where the rest of the schools are and how they're progressing to get these approved by the board and so forth, or how's it going? Because I'm very anxious on getting these things ready to go for our kids.
Yes, ma'am. So with new leadership or new media specialists, that was a consideration that came into some of the schools and their decision to not put forth a list. Some schools preferred to wait until we had guidance from the state for their discontinued list or their removed list. Some schools were in a better place with their theme and their nonfiction books, so it really depends on the school. It's the first time with this process coming forward, so I think there's a level of comfort once we go through one round of what this looks like, what it feels like, that I do anticipate many more schools will bring forth a list the next time.
Thank you. And Ms. Becerra, as far as you said this, not to be confused with the weeding, where are we on the weeding? I know we started with Sebastian. Where are we going next with that?
So the weeding process has largely been completed. We've also gone through the transferring of our library management system from Follett to Insignia. So we are in the process of just making sure that that transfer was 100% accurate. We are spot checking along the way and finding some areas that we have to go back and look at a little bit closer. The majority of our schools have finalized their weeding process and are in a great space. Sebastian River High School is in a unique space because they're going through a renovation. So it wasn't just the books that were weeded from their shelves that were removed from their shelves. It was every book that was removed from their shelves. And they are also not only in the unique position of having a renovation at this time, but they have a new media specialist. So that school, we are holding all of their books so that when they are ready to open back up and put books back on the shelves, that everything is open for that media specialist to take another look at, to just make sure. So we have a high degree of confidence across the system. The only place that we're going to allow for some more conversation is at Sebastian River High School because of the process that everything was boxed up.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Berenborg, did you have another?
Yeah, having been stepped in the shoes of a media specialist 1 year as a substitute, I was not a media specialist, but I did the job for a year. It's overwhelming to put together a list, especially to send it to a group to review. By the time, timing-wise, by the time you put that list together, get the quote, and then hopefully the school board meets to vote on it, we're going to go through this cycle over and over again if we have to wait. So I'm okay with, if prices change, I think it's up to the school to have to figure out whether or not they can afford the books or not, because they have the budgets. They can't come to us and say, we want more money for the books. We got the budget set according to what we're going to vote on soon. So I'm okay with if it winds up being an adjustment, which usually it is, because either books go on sale or they're not available at that time. So you wind up usually being less than more. So I'm okay with it.
Any other comments, board members? All right, I think we're on to Mr. Fagan and surplus property disposal.
Mr. Fagan will handle G through L.
Thank you. Ooh.
Good morning, board members, through the chair. I have several items. All these are items, examples of best financial practices to ensure that the district maintains a strong financial position. So the first item is disposal of surplus property. This is a list of items that become obsolete. The only difference between this items, if you've seen in the past, is there are 11 school buses that have reached their end of life. They're all to be surplused and sold on gov.deals, except for one bus. It will be donated to the sheriff's office for training. Any questions?
Board members, any questions on surplus?
So
Yes,
So
ma'am.
with the sheriff's office getting the donation of the bus, will we get a break from the sheriff's office on it?
I don't know the answer to that. I will follow up and find out for you.
Okay, no quid pro quo, huh? I'm getting a no from Mr. Thornton in the back. All right.
Thank you, Mr.
But we will
Fagan.
ask them to come pick it up, though.
Oh, they can pick it up. They might have to tow it.
The next item is approval of a stop-loss insurance policy. As part of the review of the annual health care plan, we go through and look at our stop-loss policy. Recall, this is a policy that basically offloads any financial risk above a certain level from us onto a reinsurer. This is what we look at every year. We look to maintain the same policy with no changes in deductibles, and cost is an increase of about $72,000 or about 10%. So again, this is anytime there's a claim over $250,000, then there's an aggregate and then a deductible.
Right.
Once that limit is hit, then any and all claims shift over to the reinsurer. Basically, it protects the different district from maybe a catastrophic claim of $3 to $5 million. It shifts that responsibility over to the reinsurer.
Mr. Fagan, is that increase at 9.8%, is that pretty normal as we do this?
It's a little higher than what it's been in the past, but we can thank Aon. Originally, that number started at 12%.
Okay. Board members, any question on the stop-loss insurance policy? Okay, good to go, Mr. Fagan.
Next item is an approval to increase the purchasing authority for Microsoft license agreement. Back in 2000, a year ago, we approved a 3-year agreement with Microsoft. This is in order to buy various products and services through them. This is basically all your Windows services, Office, email, Power BI, and et cetera. It's a 3-year agreement. Within this agreement is a 71% discount off the sticker price. If we had bought this product on wholesale price, you would have paid $1.2 million. Current price is about $360,000. The last agenda item we approved, we put a cap of $300,000. Well, simply just due to price inflation, it's gone up to about $360,000. Next year, I've made an educated guess that it could go as high as $450,000, but I doubt it. So I'm just trying to hedge my bet of not having to come back again. Probably also next year, we'll be looking to go into another agreement with them. But the key item with this is nothing really changed other than their pricing structure went up. We're still getting a 71% discount. All funds have been properly budgeted, so it's no impact on the financial side. It's just the purchasing limit needs to be increased.
Thank you. Board members, any questions on that? Mr. Barefoot or Ms. Rosario? Ms. Barrenborn? I thank you for, I'm sorry, Mr. Barefoot, go ahead.
No questions.
I thank you for looking at that and getting that 71% discount, Mr. Fagan. We need it. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Next item is a piggyback agreement through the Brevard RFP for banking services, comprehensive banking services. Our contract with Wells Fargo expired. Brevard issued an RFP. We went to the bank and said we'd like to piggyback versus issue a new one. Brevard was recently negotiated. It's a 5-year contract, very similar to the one we have today. Estimated increase per year is about $800. So as far as the cost efficiency, there's really no cost increase, no change in operations, no interruption in services, same as we currently have. So we thought it was a pretty good opportunity for the district with a smooth transition.
Thank you. Board members, any comment on the piggyback agreement with Wells Fargo? Thank you, Mr. Fagan.
Next item is a discussion item on a tax anticipation note.
All right, hold on now. Yeah, I know that.
This
Go ahead, Mr.
is a
Fagan.
workshop item only. There is no action item tonight. I just need a nod from the board members to move forward. This will then trigger me to engage our bond counsel and our financial advisor to go ahead and issue the RFP. They'll issue it on the street. The banks will respond. We'll bring it into the advisor. About mid-August, we'll get a notice of award, and we will bring it to the board on the August 28th meeting for approval. That's when you approve all the loan documents. That's when the chair and the SUP will sign. We're looking at probably about a $12 million TAN. Approximate cost is $195,000. To give you in comparison, last year the TAN was $17 million. Cost was about $150,000. And that's because of the increase in interest rate. Your cost basically doubled.
I'm going to let Ms. Barrenborn comment first.
Geez, you already heard what I said.
We got it.
You know, it drives me nuts that we have to borrow money to be able to cover costs when our taxpayers are paying so much in taxes for school. So I'm going to reiterate to the board, let's try to do something about this, because I keep yelling from the rafters, but I think it takes more gut. It takes 7 districts coming together to do something to move on this, because it's ridiculous.
In the legislative platform that we agreed to as far as getting our information together, we can make that a priority. So, and I agree. I remember meeting with Carol Jean Jordan when I campaigned last time, and we talked about the flow and it's intense slowdown until we start getting our taxpayer money and so forth. But I agree with Ms. Berenberg. I'd sure like to get a better handle on this. Dr. Posca? Mr. Barefoot?
No, Mr. Fagan, you had said that, I know what the total cost is. If this were in the marketplace today, what interest rate would be on it?
Through the chair, approximately between 4% and 5%.
It's like about the same rate as 3-month bills.
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot. Ms. Rosario? All right.
I'd like to also emphasize the reason we go to the TAN is we will, based on analysis, there's about a $7 to $8 million shortfall. It's all based on analysis looking at last year's projections projected into this year. You might hit a negative of 7, you might hit a negative of 2, or you might hit a negative of 0. But don't want to be in a situation I'm calling an emergency meeting because it takes about a month to issue that documents. We don't want to be bouncing checks.
Yes, Ms. Berenborn.
Thank you for slide 6. Because if anybody's wondering why we do this, you need to look at slide 6. Even though I don't want to vote for this, I look at slide 6 and I realize I don't want to be the reason why somebody doesn't get their paycheck.
Right.
So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Fagan. Student records.
Next item is an amendment to student records policy number 8330. If you recall, we discussed it at a couple of board briefings. This is where a policy needed to kind of be wholesale rewritten. We kind of broke it up into 3 several areas. One, we added definitions. We also clarified what student information was, permanent file and in their temporary file. We also clarified who could have access to that information. Also, it was not correctly identified as what personally identifiable information was, so we further clarified that. We also defined what directory information was. In the prior policy, it made a statement the directory information was disclosed below, but it wasn't, so now we disclosed it. The directory information is defined as a student's name and their grade level. So if a third party says, hey, I would like your directory information, that's only 2 bits of information they can get. They can't get anything else. Now, the people that are exempt from that is the military. They normally get their list. And the policy also allows, if you're higher education, if you want to get students to look forward to recruiting and go into higher education, they can get that. There's also some clarification on educational services that the district has to gather on students in order to give them access to the various platforms that the district uses for online education. We naturally collect personal identifiable information. Those vendors obviously have access to that personal information, but they all sign a data sharing agreement where they're not allowed to share that information, and also they adhere to that. Also, parents can elect out of that, because if you do, then we can't give them access. But we do give them access via the policy where to go on the website to find any and all applications and what information is collected and who the vendor is. So they have full access to that. They also do have the ability to opt out of directory information. So if moms and dads don't want even those 2 bits of information provided, they can say, no, thank you, I don't want to do that. And they do that during the focus forms when they sign on. Okay. Any questions?
Mr. Fagan or Dr. Moore, have we ever had any issues with this kind of information going out with our students? I mean,
We have not, but as Mr. Fagan has just presented, we needed to clean up this policy so it was very specific and detailed, and he and his team have done just that.
board members, any other questions on student directory information?
Yes, I have information. I have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
And by the way, I did put in the chat that I would be stepping away for just a little bit and then I'd be back. So I don't know if you received that information.
I did not, but go ahead, Ms. Rosario. Thank you.
So with regard to this, a few things, and there's so many that I don't even know where to begin, but some of the information that is in here seems to be very redundant. So we're saying it in one place and then we're repeating the same information in another place. But I will, for example, well, let's just start with the personally identifiable information on page 1 of the policy, letter D.
Yes, ma'am.
So I pulled up the let me get it in front of me. That I think it says as defined in personal identifiable information as defined in 34 CFR 99.3. I pulled that up, and personally identifiable information means a record of one or more measurable biological or behavioral characteristics that can be used for automated recognition of an individual. Examples include fingerprints, retina, and iris patterns, voice prints, DNA sequence, facial characteristics, and handwriting. It does not include all of this other stuff that's in D. So based on the definition, if we're going to stick with that rule, then we need to stick with the definition for that. The other things that are included in D would be considered, would be a definition under directory information. Still under that same code, directory of information includes, let me turn that page. Student name, address, telephone listing, electronic address, photograph, date and place of birth, major field of study, and etc. And a few other things in there. Directory of information does not include social security number, student ID number, and there's an entire list in this code. So it's just not clear that we are identifying the personally identifiable information accurately, especially if we're going to quote or include a code, then we should actually use the definition that's in the code for personally identifiable information. And then in the section where it has directory information, we should actually include everything that is in the directory of information, and so on and so forth. This was so interesting to me because this code also has the definition of eligible student, the definition of parent, the definition of what is a record, and the definition of a student. And they're slightly different written in our policy than what is in this code. So my recommendation would be to take this, to not bring this back to us tonight, because there's a lot. I found a lot of things, not just that. If you pull up 26 US Code 152, let me get that. There is also a definition of qualifying child. And this definition is also slightly different. Qualifying child is by age requirement, is a student, a child who has not attained the age of 19 as of the close of calendar year in which the taxable year of the taxpayer begins, or is a student who has not attained the age of 24 as of the close of such calendar year. So we have two codes that are in this policy that both have a slightly different definition of qualifying child in terms of age. On ours, the age actually just says at 18 years of age. So we need to, I think this needs to kind of, there doesn't seem to be a quick, a rush for this to bring there's no dates or deadlines on this. I would recommend that you pull it. I would be happy to share with you all of this information. There's more that I have found with regard to destroying of documents. I know that there's a statute in here, 1001.52, that addresses the reproduction and destruction of school district school records. So I just want us to be sure that we are producing the right information, and that we no longer have a paper, since everything is electronic, we no longer have a paper trail, I guess. I'm not sure how that works. And if we do, I think that needs to be defined as well in this policy, which it is not.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rosario, through the chair. If I could, I'd like to defer to Ms. Molly for just a moment for some of her comments, and then I'd like to have a few comments to say.
Thank you. Through the chair. So looking at this policy, this is one of your templates that comes from Neola. I have reviewed this. I do not find anything in here legally inconsistent with FERPA, so I do not think that there's any legal problem with the language here as presented. I think that, I haven't had a chance to in-depth look at each of these concerns that are being brought here right on the spot. I'm kind of going through them with you as you're saying them. For example, when I look at the personally identifiable information, how it's defined in 34 Code of Federal Regulations, section 99.3, I think this definition in here is sufficient and tracks it and also references it. So I think that we could move forward with this. This is also one of those things where if you move forward with this as it's written, we can always bring these policies back for amendment because there are quite a few changes, and I don't know if we want to hold off on making all of them. If we want to clean up the language even more later, we can certainly look at doing that. I don't know if there's anything more specific that I can say at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Mr. Fagan?
Thank you, Molly, through the chair. If I could, I would like for the board's indulgence to go ahead and approve this as is, because it is a pretty substantial cleanup. We need to make some of these things known for sure moving forward, especially regarding directory information. That's a key item that all parents need to know. What does the district define before there is no definition? So I don't really want to get us in a situation of an issue with a vendor or someone who wants our information, but we say, I can't give it to you, and the policy does not say yes or no, but generally if it doesn't say no, then it means yes. It's a error by omission. If it doesn't say I can't give it to you, then why can't you? So there are some cleanup items that Ms. Rosario has brought. That's fantastic. But I think due to what's in here presented now, it does put the district in a little bit better position than where we are today with the policy, and then we can make some of those edits as we move forward for further definition. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Berenborg, any comments? Dr. Posca? And when I look at any kind of policy, I will always look at the bottom regarding state statute. Obviously with Neola, armed services that we had quite a bit in here, and FERPA. And if we need to clean up something in general after we move forward with this, but your point on making sure that we have it correct as far as the personal identification, I think is crucial. Any other comments, board members?
Only thing I agree with Mr. Fagan. I think there's sort of the headlines, some more important points, not that they're all not. I think we need to approve this now and just commit to cleaning it up further, over the next month or two.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barefoot.
Sorry. Through the chair, the next items will be Mr. Bass, and it's M through O.
Thank you, Mr. Bass.
Good afternoon. Through the chair, I have 3 items for you. The first one is approve a contract with Hellas Construction for the construction of the track, soccer lacrosse field, and scoreboard at the Jimmy Gray Sports Complex and Community Complex. This is a $2.8 million project. 2.5 of that would be actual cost. We have a $261,000 contingency built in, and this is via the AEPA Florida buy-in agreement for athletic surfaces and lights. It'll be LED lights at the complex.
Thank you, Mr. Bass. Board members, yes, Ms. Berenborg.
First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to Senator Mayfield. She put forward an appropriations bill, and it passed, and I believe it was for 3.420, right? And so it's fully funded. Thank you. We really, really appreciate that. Appropriations are really important for communities to do something like this. This is a great example of how taxpayers' money is going to benefit all of the community. So we appreciate that, and we're excited to see it.
Yes, we are.
Dr. Pasca?
Got nothing else.
I think I told Dr. Moore I was at the Wilson Scholarship meeting on Saturday, and they were just so excited about moving forward with this. Of course, I go by every week, Vero Beach High School, looking at the field. Turf, yeah, exactly. And boy, they moved on that right away, and looking forward to that. I think Mr. Bass said this morning they'll hopefully have it a week before our first game in the fall. Such a great thing for this community. And again, thank you to Senator Mayfield, because that's where a lot of kids grew up, in that field area, and we'll continue that, and hopefully be an official site for state series someday. So thank you, Mr. Bass. Anyone else? Okay, Mr. Bass, thank you.
All right, next item I've got is the VPK provider contract with the Early Learning Coalition of Indian River County, Martin County, and Okeechobee. Our seat allotment is 184 VPK students. They'll be at 7 schools, I believe. I don't know if the blurb got updated or not. I think it originally said 6 schools, but it'll be 7 schools. Dodgertown, Fellsmere, Glendale, Indian River Academy, Pelican Island, Vero Beach Elementary, and Sebastian Elementary, for 11 full-day classrooms, no cost to the district, via the funding from the contract.
Board members, any question?
I have a
Yes.
comment. I'm not sure if it's appropriate for this, but how do we, and I see Brooke in the back, so how do we look at assessing these, all the preschools and how they're bringing students to us? I know we look at the kindergarten readiness scores. Has there been an analysis of public, it would really be nice as board members to get some sort of public document that says, here are the performances of these different daycare / pre-K providers. I know we can't do all, like, well, it would be nice if we knew if they were private as well, but it would be nice to have that information, because we don't know who's providing really great preparation for our kids and who is not.
So let me, if I can, through the chair, set Ms. Flood up here. She has created a 4-block system which ultimately evaluates our community's pre-K programs in terms of the skills in which they're teaching children. She can take us on a deeper level. We can obviously provide the board with that information, and the intent there is to build capacity through expectations, because at the end of the day, all of these students will be coming to our public school system, and we want to make sure that they are in fact kindergarten ready. That is the ultimate assessment, which is assessing students when they enter pre-K, identifying which schools they come from. Brooke has done an outstanding job of making sure we have that information to tie it back to those specific schools in order to really understand which schools are truly preparing students for kindergarten. But to take it to a deeper level.
And one other thing, not just for board members, but for parents.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think it's really important, because a parent doesn't know, they just moved here. They don't know what the best programs are for their children. So how would they find that out?
So as, through the chair, as Dr. Moore had shared, our 4-block program does share that with us. With the development of the VPK FAST, our families are finding out immediately how their students are doing, and in performing our Power BI dashboard through IT, will be able to show us, while we won't have student names, we will have the data for those students this upcoming school year based on the VPK FAST or our IRK Ready. That's our local assessment that assesses numeracy and literacy. Working through with the coalition how we can advertise that a little bit more, because with our new legislation that just came through, we aren't given our performance metrics until the 24-25 school year. So we have another year that we have to wait. But we do have our performance scores are class scores. So I'm not sure how the coalition will be sharing that out. Our classrooms did exceptionally well on that. That's our student interactions, teacher-students interactions that are observed.
And the reason why I ask that is because when we're approving a contract with them, what are we getting from it?
We actually, with the way the performance metrics is coming through, they are actually monitoring us. The school districts used to monitor our own classrooms. Now the coalition is coming in monitoring us, providing a lot of professional development, especially as we implemented the class assessment this school year. Our quality specialist, Valerie and Kelly, were in numerous times throughout the month. As soon as we received our scores, they gave us a really good overview. What does this mean? How can we perform a little bit better next time? What kind of strategies can we implement? So we are getting a lot of support from them.
Okay.
Ms. Flood, how much have we grown in the last couple of years? A lot of times I'll see you and you're adding another classroom.
Yes,
So
when I came in 2015, I had, oh gosh, how many classrooms did I have? 16. So we have gained 4 additional classrooms, 1 VPK and 3 pre-K ESC.
ESC, okay, all right, good. And I agree with Ms. Berenborg, just getting that information out, because this helps us, you know what I mean? And
Absolutely.
then, I know we've talked about, especially in MCAN Learning Alliance, working with our, Early Learning Coalition to make sure wherever these kids come from, that they're ready.
Absolutely,
So
and our
thank-
providers are really wanting to be a part of that 4-block if they've been a 1-block, so they just share the transition form, which we have been uploading hundreds and hundreds this summer, to where the teachers, principals can look at that immediately. I don't know that parents can yet. We might eventually, but parents had to sign off that we had that transition form. So the teachers have that immediately, so they knew right where that student left off when they left the pre-K program.
Ms. Flood, would they go, let's say they go to Sebastian Elementary for VBK, is that where they will go to kindergarten for the most part?
So this year, we really try to encourage our families to apply to their zone school. Some live in North County, but they work in South County, and due to transportation, they might want to go to a South County, but what we're finding is if they're at a Vero Beach Elementary or Pelican Island that serves multiple schools, they will do choice to stay on those campuses.
Okay, all right, but wherever they stay, it's just a good head start for them, you know?
Absolutely.
Because that, as we do for the summer, is kindergarten readiness, getting those students there, it's just so important. Thank you.
So I'm sorry.
Just go ahead, Dr. Moore.
I'll schedule a debrief with Ms. Flooding and provide that additional information.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty, any other comments on that? All right, I think Mr. Bass, are you-
I have one more. I
Okay.
have 2 job descriptions to bring to you tonight. They're both for the position of program specialist. One is in adult ed, the other is in CTE. Program specialist, we've adapted the job description to meet both of those areas. The reason for bringing this forward is we have got additional funding in both the Carl Perkins grant and the adult ed grant this upcoming year. Potentially down the line, this could, with some transformation and new responsibilities, could eliminate some general fund positions also.
Yes, Ms. Berenborg?
Yeah, we did have the program specialist position before, and that was, I think, before you guys were on the board. We dissolved that, and then that was under the umbrella of Ms. Emerson, I believe. And then it's come back. So who's it been under the umbrella of now?
This will be Ms. Shields.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
Okay. And so both these positions are going to be under her as
Yes,
well?
correct.
And so we're growing that campus, we're growing the need. Okay.
Yes.
So you see this as a full-time position?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Because in the past, when we were asked just a few years ago to dissolve it, we were told it wasn't.
No, this will be full-time. Both of
Okay.
these will be.
Okay.
Mr. Bass, on the CTE one, does that, we would have our Vero Beach High School CTE person, Ms. Burr, and then we have Mr. Lang. This is something different, right?
This is something different.
Okay.
Yes.
But
All
it
right.
is the repurposing of those 2 positions. So it's not adding bodies to the system.
Okay.
It's the repurposing of those positions to strengthen the tie between our K-12 CTE programs, pulling them into our own technical college. We are the only district on the Treasure Coast that has a technical college, and we need to be very strategic on how we're using it. And our farm system to feed our technical college is in fact the K-12 space. So this allows a higher level of alignment in order to get that done for those individuals.
Thank you. Ms. Berenborg.
So what will happen with the CTE positions that are at the two high schools now?
You'll be seeing, as we repurpose these particular positions, Mr. Lang is taking a position in industry somewhere else. Other individuals who are serving in Sebastian will go ultimately into that specific role. So they'll either be absorbed or apply for these new positions the board is approving.
Okay.
Any other comments? All right. And next.
And then, let me go back to Mr. Fagan real quick. He had one
Oh.
additional ask, and I completely moved
Okay.
on too quickly.
Thank you, Dr. Moore, through the chair to the board. So tonight we have the meeting for the tentative millage and tentative budget. And so I wanted to go through, if we don't mind, the board's indulgence, a few highlights for tonight to maybe answer any questions you might have to avoid tonight. So first off, a big thank you to Kim Coleman and the entire staff. Without them and their support and dedication to this hard and complex work, we would not be here today. All your trim advertisements were published and are in compliance with the Department of Revenue. If you recall, during the discussion on the trim advertisements, there was a 14.7% increase. After we got the final certification, that reduced down to 12.21. And that is, there's a difference between that and what we call the rollback rate. Rollback rate looks at all millages. This particular interest rate here looks only at required local effort, and it's also based on a Department of Revenue posting. Your millage rates, we are imposing no more, no less. We are imposing upon exactly what DOE has requested us to impose. Anything greater than this would require a vote or referendum. And as a matter of fact, our millage rates actually went down by 0.0274 or about 1%. This doesn't mean people's tax bill went down because if their values of their property assessed higher, that will be high, but technically the millage rate did go down. Moving into the tentative budget, all funds are balanced, and you have a 5% ending fund balance in general fund of about $9 million. There's a slight change in the staff allocation model, but nothing significant. Capital funds, we have appropriated $150,000 for the performing arts, $350,000 for playground equipment. If you recall, we completed Sebastian, Citrus, and Rosewood, and Liberty Elementary is the next school on the list for replacement, basically because of age and condition. On debt, you have several COP certificate of participation in your long-term debt for any improvements to your facilities. 2 of those obligations get paid off in July of 25, so in 2 years from now. You have another obligation that gets paid off in July of 27. That's 4 years from now. Then that'll be the bulk of your debt. You have a qualified school construction bond that's paid off in December of 28 or in 5 years. So in essence, in 5 years, all your long-term debt will be paid off in 2028. The only thing you'll have after that is you have 2 energy efficiency contracts, one with Con Ed and Florida Power and Light. They do not, the final payment on those 2 do not end until October of 29 and 32, which I will still be here presenting the budget information to you. So I'll be happy to announce the payoff and final closing of that. The health insurance fund is stable and has a sufficient fund balance of about $6 million, so no problems there. Charter schools, projection for next year is about 2,200 students. Budget is about $22 million, but this year they do share in our 1.5 mills that we collect from capital. This year they'll get about $785,000 of our money, which is about $42 million. If you recall, in the past, the state funded that piece for many, many years. Well, effective this year, we have to pay 20%, and it moves up 20% every year thereafter. If they were getting the full value today, it would be $4 million out of our capital pot. So we're obviously planning on an increase in property taxes again. This year went up 17% again, so we get more revenue to offset that. So you really can't say, I lost money, you just had an opportunity loss. Instead of keeping it all, I have to share what I'm going to gain. One interesting item I want to make sure to mention is district's non-health insurance. So we always talk about healthcare, but you also have property and casualty, workers' comp, things like that. The state of Florida increase in property casualty was somewhere between 50 to 80% for most people. Due to our dedicated risk management team, our increase was about $370,000 or 8%. So our property casualty, which is your biggest piece, had a very small increase. Family empowerment. For next year, we're projected to have 1,100 students. That's a 565 FTE increase or 102%. Last year, you only had 565 students. This is DOE's projection. We don't know if it's going to happen, but that's what they've appropriated for us. That's equivalent to a $4.5 million increase. Now, if the kids don't show up, if they come back to our schools, then we'll pick up the FTE. If they disappear within the state of Florida, then nobody gets the money. Overall, your budget, your FTE was expected to increase by 501 or 3%. That 500 kids is family empowerment. So the state is not projecting any growth in our student body, and that's kind of what we expected, somewhere between a 300 to 400 decline. Projected, we'll see what happens on the first FTE count. Your property values increased another $4 billion. Last year was 3.9 billion, or another 16%. So we're still, spiraling to the atmosphere with increases in property values. State funding decreased $3.5 million, or 7.5%. But your local funding, it increased $15 million, or about 11%. Total funding for the district for next year, $11 million. So we got $11 million of brand new money. Let's go buy some lottery tickets. Of that $11 million, $4.5 million is for family empowerment. That's basically a set aside. You got to earmark that coming out of the gate. Teacher salary allocation increased $1.4 million. So that's that teacher increase in allocation for the teachers. The state funds it. It's a mandatory requirement. It's another categorical. FRS increased 1.66%. That's going to cost us $1.6 million. Health insurance, right now the figure is about $1.2 million cost to the district. That leaves approximately $1 million, or 1%, for the district to use this for discretionary purposes. Any questions?
Just one. What was the minor change in the student allocation model? We said we had a little bit of a change here, but I couldn't.
One moment. Graduation coaches were removed, and we added deans.
Okay.
A couple of changes in a couple of counselors' allocations to balance out across the district.
Right.
Added some basic teachers to Dodgertown, added a success coach to Vero Beach Elementary provided by the Learning Alliance, added a couple of behavior techs. Adjustments, deans at the middle school, added 2 ROTC allocations before. They were part of the basic allocation,
Right.
which meant they were part of the allocations, assuming all teachers can teach whatever subjects they can and maybe something else. ROTC instructors are limited to ROTC.
Right.
So if I don't have a full class load, that means I've kind of got some capacity there that I can't use them for somewhere else. So we converted those to just being a straight allocation, because generally the 2 high schools would come to us and say, when I build my master schedule, I'm still short a little bit.
Right.
So they'd be asking for an add-on. So this will eliminate those add-on, and it balances out allocations to actual use in the school.
That's good, that's all I need.
That's pretty much it.
Board members, any questions, comments? Ms. Berenborg?
Yes, first of all, thank you for spending one-on-one time with me. I appreciate it, and answering all the questions I had. You mentioned advertisement of the trim notices. So where did we advertise?
Through the chair, to TC Palm on Friday.
So I do know that there was a statute change in how we advertise our meetings and things like that. And I know we've approached the county about helping us with that to save money on advertising all of our meetings, everything. There's a new statute. We can go to the county, and the county can help us with that. However, the county kind of turned us down the last time, but they've had a change in management and things like that, an attorney. So I'm wondering if we can maybe ask again.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. We'll follow up on that.
Okay.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Fagan, for that update before we go into that hearing tonight. All right, I think we're on to Mr. Seymour, Dr. Moore.
Yeah, yes, Madam Chair. Mr. Seymour will bring us home.
Okay, this is the review through the chair of the SDIRC Family Reunification Plan. Board members, you have been briefed on the confidential reunification plan, which should have been uploaded to your executive content file. Be it that this is a confidential file, I would be more than happy to answer any questions that may not jeopardize our school safety. So I do have our safety specialist, Mr. Teskey, here as well.
Thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board members, any questions? And again, this is on our board docs under our file that we have to go into. It's not for the public. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. Seymour.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Ms. Rosario.
Just to confirm that what is in this plan, because Mr. Fagan provided some additional information to us in an email that basically had all of mental health services comprised, I think the number is a little more than $12 million. From what it's my understanding that what Mr. Seymour is presenting is only from the state funds, right? I see Mr. Fagan shaking his head, is only from state funded category, but that the plan Mr. Seymour is presenting does indeed fall under that 2 million. It does encompass within the 12 million, sorry.
Mrs.
Is that
Rosario,
correct, Mr.
we're still
Fagan?
on the family reunification
get-
plan. We're still on the family reunification plan. We haven't gotten to the next one yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I thought I
okay.
heard him.
You got it.
I thought I heard the presentation of that. I apologize. I'm ahead of myself.
That's okay. Any more questions or comments, board members, regarding family reunification? All right, Mr. Seymour, now we go into the mental health allocation plan.
Okay. Actually, I'll be referencing two documents. The responses to board member questions will also be referenced. You've been provided a copy of the 23-24 mental health application, as well as the planned funds and expenditures sheet, which defines how the funds and expenditures will be disseminated. And aside from the district staff, their responsibilities for every member in our district and especially on our campuses. So when we look at the questions that were asked in responses to the board member questions submitted by Mr. Fagan, we look at page 2, item 3, and the section A is a brief explanation of the district's responsibility towards students with mental health concerns. It reflects an approximate budget of $12.3 million in section B, with a breakdown of the specific team members that fall under that category on pages 27 and 28 under the Wellness and Mental Health Services for Students page. In section C, the state of Florida mandated 80% of our school-based staff to be certified in youth mental health first aid by the end of 22-23, whereas the school district of Indian River County certified 95% of the staff in 22-23. I would like to also give a shout out to Ms. Ainge, who pulled this information together, but I also have one of our key program specialists here, Dr. Tracy Crawford, as well as our Director of Student Services, Dr. Paula Lewis.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Seymour. Board members, any questions or comments? Or Dr. Moore or Mr. Fagan, did you want to say something first?
I know Ms. Rosario was asking a question. On Mr. Fagan, you can provide a response. I don't know if she was.
Could we wait? Ms. Rosario, could you ask your question one
Yeah,
more time,
sure.
please? Ms. Rosario? Just want to make sure I have the question before I can understand. Okay, Mr. Fagan, go ahead and we'll go back if we need to.
Through the chair. So there's two items in question. One of them is there's an agenda item for the maintenance, for the mental health plan that goes to the state. That's why we call an FEFP allocation, direct allocation from the state, that we have to submit a plan for mental health. But the district goes above and beyond to present mental health services and what we would refer to as a safety net for students, for anybody and everybody who's trained in order to recognize a child who may be in distress and may need some assistance. So on the supplemental information, we listed pretty much any and all individuals who are trained, which Mr. Seymour referred to as we are required to teach, 100% staff are supposed to be trained. So that includes anyone that's on my list that I have about 212 people, plus your SROs, plus all your school-based administrators, plus all your teachers. So you probably have about 1,800 to 2,000 people in the school that have this safety net, that have this training. Now, we don't provide services. Dr. J, please correct me if I say something wrong. We don't give therapy, but we're trained to recognize if a child is having a problem and then get them information they need or provide them with direction. But trained to recognize a problem, you have almost everybody on every campus is trained that way. Dr. J?
So just as Mr. Fagan has suggested, we have a significant number of staff who are trained in identifying the signs and symptoms which may indicate a student needs additional supports or to be connected with additional supports. We do have a subset of staff members, mental health specialists, school psychologists, school counselors that may provide solution-based counseling for students in order to assist them with some of the concerns that they're experiencing in the school setting. However, those services are always provided following consent from a student's parents for those services. And if more long-term care is needed, we are accustomed to making those connections with outside agencies for long-term services.
Thank you, Dr. Jacobs. Board members, questions, comments? Mr. Barefoot? Good. Ms. Rosario? Ms. Berenborg? Dr. Posca. I just want to say, Mr. Seymour, thank you. I mean, the training that, was it 85% that the training was finished last year? I can't remember.
Yeah, the state requires 80%, and we met 97%. And our expectation is that we have 100.
Wonderful. And just, you know, what Dr. Jacobs said as far as if we need to refer to longer-term care, that will help the families. And obviously, this is consent from the parents. And but looking at the funds and expenditures, again, I think we do a great job in New River County for helping our students and families who need it and want it. I appreciate that. Any other comments? Dr. Moore, I'm sorry.
No, I just want to make sure we had one more item.
Yes, sorry. Go ahead, Mr. Seymour.
Okay, the next is the 23-24 School Resource Deputy Officer SRD, SRO Agreement, and MOU. Board members, you've been briefed on the confidential School Resource Deputy Officer Agreement and MOU, which should have been uploaded to your executive content file due to the nature of the information. Please note that our intention is to have 100% signed and approved by each agency. We are currently awaiting our final approval from the Vero Beach Police Department, which should arrive to us by August 8th.
Okay, any comments, board members? I was here when that started a long time ago with Brad Voitek. One of the best things this district ever did. And I really, really, Mr. Thornton back here, appreciate the partnership and the communication. And I love whenever I go on campus talking to SROs, and they take such a responsibility for that job, and they love being there. So thank you, Milo Thornton, for your guidance on that, and the Sheriff's Department for that contract.
And since you mentioned Captain Thornton, thank you for his services as well. He comes to us at no cost, he and Lieutenant Knott. And as you know, we actually cost share 50% for 29 officers. It's based on the years of services and their status. In addition to that, that 50% of cost sharing equates to 1.3 million. So we're just glad to have all of these individuals in support, and they are always supportive and very beneficial when we need their services.
Right. Did we not hire someone especially for technology? We talked about that one time. We got
Through
an
the chair,
additional one?
yes, we
Okay.
have that position and
Okay.
a few others.
Okay.
Did they get hired, though? That's what she's asking.
Oh, well, I had to defer to Mr. Thornton. I believe he told me his team is all set and ready to go.
Ready to go?
We're
Okay.
good?
Thank you.
So,
Yes, ma'am.
comment, so we gave them a school bus and we got Mr. Thornton. So you're worth the
Yeah,
school bus.
we'll take
All right,
that deal.
got
We'll
it.
take that deal. We'll definitely.
Yeah, that's a trade. That's a good one. All right.
So, Madam Chair, that exhausts the agenda. Just want to thank my team this afternoon, or this evening. I'll have the opportunity to present some academic outcomes for our district and share some of the good news and progress that our system has made. And as I sit here and ultimately sit back and listen to the depth in which the individuals who sit at this table can speak to their items, their level of professionalism, just makes me feel very, very, very proud for the work that's being done and the individuals who are ultimately doing that work. So thank you, team.
It was a great workshop, especially with the information we received ahead of time, getting the questions we needed to have, and I appreciate you getting us ready for 23-24. The meeting is adjourned at 2:04.